Okay, welcome back to our June 22nd Board of County Commissioners meeting. We're going to resume with departmental number 5, update on the development of the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, presented by John Mayle.
Departmental number 5.
Number 5.
Just want to do a mambo.
No, doesn't change the mic.
Okay, there we are.
We can hear
Thank
you.
Chair, thank you, Board. This is John Mayle, Martin Ecosystem Restoration Division Manager in Public Works. Appreciate the opportunity to bring this item before you today. We are excited to get some feedback and direction from you today on how to kind of wrap up or to move forward with our next PDT, which will take us very near to the finish line for the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual planning process. My presentation today is going to be a little less structured than normal for a couple of reasons. That I already mentioned is that we're really here to try and get as much feedback and direction from the board as possible for how to see this through, and also the information that comes out for this becomes antiquated in about 5 minutes. So this presentation that was submitted for public notice a couple of weeks ago has changed several times since then. So a couple of these will just be placeholders. Thus, the handout that Donna probably put on each one of your desks, there's some information here that will be more current. I say more current because as we speak, the project delivery team is discussing these things and making changes in real time. So by the time this meeting's over, some of this will probably be slightly different than it is, but for the most part, pretty close. So where are we? The slide that's on your screens now is kind of a chart of steps, and we're at the iteration 2, which was 5 plans, is now 6 plans. The last time that we spoke, I believe we were looking at 11 plans that were kind of single objective plans. These are supposed to be balanced plans that the Corps believes represents more generally the needs of the entire system. What's coming is July 14th, the Corps, the Army Corps plans to release their preferred schedule. We'll talk a little bit more at the end of this presentation about what's coming next. The 6 plans, I know this only shows 5. The alternative EE that's at the bottom here was split into 2 different plan options in the last week. These 6 plans emphasize pretty much uniformly they were looking for opportunities to send more water south to reduce damaging discharges to both estuaries and to improve water supply. Alternative DD adds in the emphasis of trying to address algal bloom risk and to manage the lake stage for lake ecology. Plan D, really at its heart, the strategy for Plan D was based on an assumption that we have balance today and that the plan would make an incremental improvement for all stakeholders. Your team has been arguing that we don't currently have balance, and so we have spoken out against Plan D for that reason. Plan EE is kind of its own animal. It doesn't look like the rest of the plans. It's a little bit harder to analyze, although the performance output is pretty clear. It's not really all that good for us. But what it does is it tries to incorporate memory and flexibility. One of the things that Colonel Kelly has heard loud and clear during his tenure is that that the stakeholders appreciate the adaptability that he has employed to manage the lake for within the allowable range that the LORS 08 allows for, to manage it with the totality of information that's available to him, not just what the LORS calls for being measured. And the stakeholders have generally agreed that that's been a productive element. And this Plan EE was an attempt to try and kind of mathematically build that into a plan. But what it seems to do, in our opinion, is manage the lake to too tight of an envelope, and it really increases releases to us. It doesn't seem to serve a very balanced approach, and so that's not one that we're very excited about. I'll get into the other A through D in a little more detail. This is an antiquated slide. I could probably just tell you how these are updated. It's close. Plan AA actually reduces discharges by 74%. So for us, let me back up a second. For us, we tried to really simplify our analysis of this. Many of the stakeholders have a whole bunch of different variables that they're examining, and some are in conflict with one another, even for an individual stakeholder. For instance, the West Coast, they want dry season flows that help to maintain a healthy salinity gradient throughout the Caloosahatchee River, but they don't want damaging flows in the wet season. But they're pulling that water from the same body of water that's available to them during the water year. And so if they try to improve one, sometimes it costs them on the other end. And for us, it's been very, very simple. We believe the first gallon of water that comes from the lake is damaging, and we've approached our advocacy to that end throughout the process. So when we evaluate the performance of each of the plans, we generally look most heavily at how much lake water comes to the C44 from the lake on an average annual basis. So Plan A reduces those discharges by 74%. Plan BB increases discharges 21%. Plan CC reduces discharges by 62%. Plan DD reduces discharges by 23%. I know those numbers are not what are on your slide, but if you look at page 47 I know there aren't 47 pages, but the page numbers at the top right are from the presentation that I pulled these from. Page 47 shows the today's average annual 1,000 acre feet of discharge for each of those plans. I also wanted to lead into a discussion about what we call Part D in these schedules. That's what you're seeing here is an example of our existing Part D decision tree. So what happens here, just in a nutshell, on the far left side, these boxes identify a lake stage, and along with this will be another document that shows the stage of the lake and where these zones fall throughout the year, and it changes every day. It's a different lake stage, and it creates a chart that's moving. But anyway, when the colonel's making a decision about releases, this is what he'll go to. He'll look at what lake stage we're in, the tributary hydrologic conditions, the forecast, and that will lead him to a up to amount for releases. This is our existing guidance right here. So you'll see in a base flow, at any given time in the base flow, that the colonel can release up to 200 cubic feet per second. And as you go up the right-hand side of this, the S80 is the St. Lucie locks. That's where water releases to the St. Lucie River. You've got 200, 1170, 1800, 200, 1170, 1800, and on up. That's what is under LORS 08. So having this kind of, I think, helps as a baseline for looking at the other Part D schedules for plans that we're looking at now. As an example, I put up Plan CC's Part D, and then I also included in your documents the Part D for each of the other plans that are moving forward. And again, this says it was revised May 17. It's been revised again, and so this one's antiquated, but the one that you have in front of you is accurate. And you'll see as you work from the bottom up for the S80, the St. Lucie locks, it's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, all the way up to, in the current version, maybe this would be a good time to pull up the doc cam.
Use that no more.
I've never done this, so I just wanted an excuse to use it.
Oh,
There we go. So you'll see this, the current version of CC stays at 0 all the way up to the Zone C, which is an intermediate zone as we know them. And when you have very wet tributary hydrologic conditions and you have a wet forecast, the S80, the Corps could release up to 38 or 3,600 CFS under the current version of this. One thing I'll note, in Zone C and Zone B, this is Plan CC, and we can look at any of the plans you want to. I really just kind of want to set this up as a framework, and then open it up to your discussion. Hopefully, if you have questions, I have the material hopefully to answer your questions. But one thing I would point out is that Zone C and Zone B, in most of these plans, and particularly in CC, that zone is very, very narrow. So what I suspect happens in modeling is that when you run up to when you're in Zone C or the intermediate zone and you've got very wet tributary conditions and you have a very wet forecast, you're not going to spend very much time in this category right here. We'll blow right through that, and then we'll be in the high zone where they can, in every single plan, that Zone A allows the Corps to discharge practical amounts. For us, the capacity of the St. Lucie Lock is 7,200 CFS. Ideally, we don't get there very often, but it is possible. So I just context, each one of these boxes don't represent an equal amount of time. Frankly, we spend most of our time down in Zone D and Zone E, but there is the possibility to get to those zones. Originally, the CC plan had zeros all the way up to Zone A, and they amended that in the last couple of weeks to try to increase the performance for the West Coast in reducing high volume discharges to them.
Do you have the other three charts that you can put up just for comparison?
Absolutely. So here's this one is AA.
John, they're in the packet too, right?
Yes.
Same one.
So on page 99 in your packet, you can see Zone A, or Plan AA also has zeros up until you get to Zone C, very wet, and a wet forecast, or rather normal to wet. You'd have 1,000 CFS, and then 1,400, and then in Zone B, which is the high zone, if the forecast is dry and tributary hydrologic conditions are dry, there'd be zero discharges, but it bounces up to 1,400 when the forecast goes up. And then Zone A, of course, again, Zone A is always going to be 7,200 CFS for the S.
Are there examples when CC is preferable to AA?
Yes, there are.
Which are those?
It gets into the weeds like I said, we've been focusing, and my conversation today is focused totally on 308 lake releases. There are other metrics that we use to measure the performance for the St. Lucie River. If you remember last year, we were kind of working through actually it's probably 2 years ago, we were working through the performance measures for the St. Lucie River, which establishes, hey, this is how much flow we can have in the St. Lucie River from all sources, from groundwater, rainfall, C23, 24, North Fork, 10 Mile Creek, and the C44 basin, as well as the lake. All those sources, there's up to 1,400 CFS recovered, determined that's optimal, and that over 1,400 is stressful and over 1,700 is damaging. But again, and we're constantly reaffirming that that's the totality of water that flows to the St. Lucie River, not just lake water. And so in the performance output of the models, the Army Corps is evaluating, at least in part, based on the recover performance measures. We have been continually arguing that seeing that the first drop of water from the lake is damaging, that the 308 really should be the only measure of performance. There's been a fair bit of pushback on that, and it seems like where the Corps is landing is weighting the 308 releases at about 50% of that performance measure, and then dividing the remainder of that performance measure into different zones of recover. And then they distinguish between what are lake lake-related impacts and basin-related impacts. Because there are times when we are not getting lake releases, fresh water from other sources, unnatural sources, I'll add, in the C23, 24, and 44 basins that trigger stressful and damaging events to the St. Lucie River. So they try to distinguish between those. It's not on 100% foolproof method in our evaluation of it. They use a rolling 2-week average, and if the basin is above 1,400 CFS or the other sources of fresh water, then that is triggered as a basin event, not a lake event, even if there's lake water involved with that. So that's been a point of contention in the process for us as PDT members. But it does seem like they are leaning towards using a weighted measure. So to answer your question, it's way too long of an answer. There are some recover performance measures where CC exceeds AA. And the other thing that I'll point out is that generally speaking, CC tends to be more balanced system-wide than any of the other plans, and probably more for the whole system than AA is. So this is AA. BB, coming back to Commissioner Smith's request to see all these. BB is an interesting one. I might have to zoom out a bit. This one, can you see that?
I'll go a little bit more in.
Yeah, let me go back in a little bit more.
Oh, too far.
Vanessa's not my thing here. Let's see. So you see that jumbled mess in those blue boxes? Base flow, it's a 0 CFS, but what Plan BB attempts to do is reduce the amount of harmful algal bloom impacts to the northern estuaries. So it creates seasons. If you look at this next box up, in the parentheses, this is January, February, and March. Releases in this band would be at 530 CFS, January through March. June, July, and August, they would be 0, and that is based on the assumption that those are the highest periods of risk for having algae in the lake that would then be discharged to the estuary. And then September through December would be the highest volume of discharges. The challenge that your staff have with this plan is that it places all the emphasis on blue-green algae as the impact to the estuary, where we have been arguing really from the beginning that it's not just an algae issue. Algae is critical, and we're not giving that enough importance in terms of its impacts to human health. However, salinities during oyster spawn are critical. Salinity levels on the reef are critical. Nutrient levels that are dumping into an already impaired water body for nitrogen and phosphorus are critical things to take account of, and Plan BB does not do that well at all, and it ends up with much more discharges in total to the St. Lucie River, just not during algae growing season as we know it. Yes, Commissioner.
John, and maybe you said this and I missed it somehow because I was trying to look at the numbers. The zone A, B, C, D, and then E is added on alternative AA. What are the zones?
So the zones are lake bands, or lake level
Okay,
bands.
they're the operating band.
And they're all different in each plan, and they're different throughout the year. And so, they look like these lines that they look like a landscape, right? There are some similarities, like the zone A is the high band. That's really kind of dictated by the dam safety metric, which is kind of a pass-fail in this process. You either meet the dam safety metric or you don't, and they're not allowed to violate that. And then one of the other factors is state laws concerning water deliveries, and so those bands, well, there's a certain amount of flexibility. They all look somewhat similar. One of the things that some of the stakeholders have argued for is a removal of one of those bands. As LORZA 8 has it, there's a beneficial use band that's towards just above the water shortage management band and just below the base band. That band precludes water delivery to the Caloosahatchee for environmental supply. They're really the only one that gets cut off when they want water. And so some of the stakeholders have been advocating for not having that banned anymore. And why distinguish between people that want water in the dry season?
So the one that has, the one that you have up now, which is the BB,
Yes.
BB, right? That's the,
Yes.
the screen you have up now?
That's correct.
And that's the one that recognizes the algae months, right?
That's correct.
Is there a way, is that what they tried to do when they tried to separate the EE apart? Or did they take like the algae banned months and blend that like into a CC or an AA? And could you do that?
EE, I call it the calculus plan. It wasn't doing that. What it was trying to do was recognize that there are times when a plan needs to be adaptable and build that adaptation into it. For instance, in 2019, or in 2018 and 17 and 18, we had really high lake levels. Really, we had like 3 out of 5 years up to 2018, which were way too high in the lake. And it was impacting the submerged aquatic vegetation on the littoral shelf. They were down to 5,000 acres from 40,000 acres on the west side of the lake. And in deference to that concern, the Corps managed the lake lower in the following to try and recover some of that submerged aquatic vegetation. And to their credit, succeeded. It went back to like 26,000 acres from 5,000 acres. And what the interest in EE was is to recognize and to build in different modes to acknowledge that there's times where you might want to run the lake lower or higher to account for variation.
So is there a way to insert the algae months into the other beneficial, and just to that point, where if you had like we were heading into this season, where you already had algae very, very early on in the season, is there a way to add into the equation, like that bottom band that recognizes zero flows during the algae time, but you only get that when there's a percentage of algae or there's some factor, just like you were talking about with the other piece, that you, by special something, you incorporate zero discharges to the St. Lucie estuary because there's algae in the lake.
Yeah, I think you could do that. You could suggest that with any of these plans. For instance, this is CC again that I've got on the doc cam. If you look up to that 3,600, you could split that up by season, or you could suggest that to the Corps that as a possible amendment to CC that would be 0 in June, July, and August, and maybe that would be a higher number, September through December. You certainly could. The challenge staff has had with that is we have resisted the notion of conceding that dry season flows to the St. Lucie River are acceptable. We have seen the impacts to seagrass from total suspended solids. Primary source of that is Lake Okeechobee. We really don't get a lot of sediment from the other sources. We've been able to demonstrate that mild impacts to salinity from freshwater releases impact coral reef pretty substantially. And that science is developing, but we're already off to a pretty definitive place on demonstrating that salinity impact and how that lens doesn't dilute like you might think it would when it hits that salt water, and the sensitivity of that coral to those. So we as staff have been resistant to setting aside our interests for dry season discharges as well.
Great.
There's one other thing I wanted to show you. I mean, I got lots of other stuff here, but this is a chart that they started using. I know that looks a little bit challenging at first, but
Yeah.
our team has kind of agreed this might be the best representation of how you see balance. Each of these abbreviations are our stakeholder groups. So this is algal bloom risk. This is the St. Lucie estuary. This is recreation for the lake, navigation for the lake, Lake Okeechobee ecology. These are water supply interests on the left. This is the Caloosahatchee, South Florida ecosystem, which is Everglades. So this is a coalescing of the different performance measure computations, and then assigning it a weighting and putting that all together. So each one of these, for instance, the Caloosahatchee really represents about 6 different metrics, and this shows how well this performs. The further you are to the outside, the greater. This is really hard to do, actually. The further you are to the outside of the circle, the greater performance it is for that stakeholder. And so each of those lines is representative of a plan, with the exception of the black line. That's representative of our future without, or it's really kind of our existing conditions plus the infrastructure that will be in place by 2025. So the black line is kind of our baseline, and then each of these is different plans. And you'll notice that over here, Plan CC and Plan AA perform the best out of these plans. None of these eliminate discharges, but these 2 plans provide the best performance of these 6 plans for the St. Lucie estuary. When you go to any of the other plans from those 2, you see there's a dramatic drop off between the 2 that perform the best and the next 4. What this represents is what we've kind of been along, is that some mild compromise for benefit to some of the stakeholders can make a dramatic improvement in the reduction of damages for our stakeholder, for us as a stakeholder group. So this just is a good representation. We also, you look at that, those 2 plans seem to encompass the greatest part of our team is calling it the pizza. You're splitting this pizza up among your children. This ends up with the happiest family with those 2 plans.
That's actually a great chart, John.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, it really,
now that I understand.
now that I understand it.
Right.
Yeah, I got it.
I assume that was created by the Army Corps.
All of this came
It
from.
certainly was created by engineers.
So, John, is there a way,
Go ahead, John.
so, and maybe this, I mean, pictorially it looks perfectly understandable now, but is there a way to graph it, and maybe that's what the vertical number is, to show the different constituency, who wins and who loses by percentage? So on the AA, if that's the right color, right, and the red, which is the CC, that's our best 2, right?
Those are the 2 that perform the best of these 6 plans for us.
So let's say that's at 95% if the outer band is 100%, the outer spider web, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're calling 100%.
The chart.
So for us, 100% would be 0 discharge. It's not on this chart. So we might, for if we were creating this, we might call that like a 40 or 50% out there at the 1. But for purposes of,
So can we do that so when the public sees this, because you won't be around to explain to every single person that sees this, what is it? So who are the winners, who are the losers, and where are we in the chart? So right now on that chart for red and for gold, I guess, right? Or not, mustard is DD maybe.
yeah, I'm not good with colors, but
If that's the 50% mark, right? Just hypothetically, the others are down, like the black one, the black and the green, some of them are down at 20%, 5%.
So the black plan, this may be helpful. It's not what you're asking, but it might help. The black plan is what conditions
Are in
are.
condition, okay.
Yeah, and so that really shows how imbalanced it is currently. So I think I hear what you're saying. Is there a way that we can graphically show how far that really comes towards our ultimate objective of 0 discharges?
It's just so the public would have something to understand, to say, that's why, and if that's what you're saying, that these are the 2 options we should be advocating for.
To be clear, for the record, I'm not saying that. I know it sounds like it, but we have maintained that our position is zero discharges, and that these plans that we have available to us now, those are the two that perform the best of those plans. The
Okay,
plan we really want's not here.
On them.
So two parts to that, right? If we're saying zero, we're not advocating for anything. If that puts us in a good spot, I think we should be advocating for something.
That's exactly the kind of direction we're looking for. We have been from the beginning walking the line of preserving our position and building a legal record that's consistent, and participating as project delivery team members in this process. And to date, that's worked very well. The Corps, I believe, sees us as good participants in the process, and I believe the team has influenced the process greatly. They have expressed that we've held them quite accountable in the process. However, we have always disclaimed our input with what we really need is zero lake releases, because there was no historic connection and we have no beneficial relationship, and harmful algal blooms have not been appropriately accounted for, salinity impacts to the nearshore reef, and all these things, all these reasons we've been talking about. We overlay all of our participation with where we stand.
So if you were to graph our chart, what would it look like? Way out to the right.
When you say graph our chart, our zero
Our zero,
discharges?
yeah.
Okay.
You'd have a spike off the chart.
Yeah, it would not be a circle anymore. I mean, we can work on it, and I could come up with something. Our team, of course, is extremely talented, and
From my perspective, I'm sure everybody else has their own opinion, but I think if we were to, even if we keep advocating for zero, to graphically show that somehow against everybody else's something that shows really we're way over here, and the next thing is over here, that's where we want to be. If that's
I see what you're saying. I think there's some merit that, and I think it could be something we could work on and come up with. Another way of maybe saying what you're saying is that the Plan CC and AA, as we see it here, is already a compromise. It looks like we're getting everything we want, but it represents a compromise,
and it's only 50% of where we'd want to be.
something to that order. I think that Plan CC reduces discharges by around 60%, 62%, and so you could say that that's 62% of the way there. So that could be you could really move that line
That's
into
why I was saying if you had a chart that showed you by percentage,
Right.
like here's 100% and we're at 62%,
Right.
where ideally for us, zero would be perfect.
Here's another way to illustrate it. Everybody sees these things a little bit differently. So this might kind of more do what you're suggesting. So these over here are the really just look at the 308 flows for simplicity. These are the actual thousands of acre feet on an average annual basis over the 52 year period of record, and then over here shows the percentage of change from the existing conditions. And so CC, you see, that's where you get the 62%. That's a 62% reduction. And 100% reduction, of course, would be our objective. So that one maybe shows, but it only shows for the St. Lucie as a stakeholder. So you'd have to, it doesn't combine them all. So here's the Caloosahatchee for each of the plans and how it performs. And you could look at South Florida or water supply. It doesn't put it all in one neat chart like the circle, the pizza does.
You did a good job explaining it.
Yeah.
I think my team's probably cringing right now in their offices.
This one, for me visually, this one I struggle with. Your pizza, I do better. The only thing that's misleading in there is if you were to look at that and people were to understand that we are the ENV SLE, right? You would think if the outer band meant good, that's where we'd want to be. Versus one more band or one more delineate. If the center is 0 and the outside is 100% success, that might help people understand better that we're only a partial way there.
That's good insight. We'll work on that.
Thank you. It's great though. I mean, it's interesting.
Commissioner Hearn.
So, one of the iterations you said also took into account recover statistics, which are the discharges from our own. So, since this is the Lake Okeechobee management schedule, how is that part of the calculation?
That's part of the argument that we've been making. Exactly, Commissioner Hurd, that we have been advocating for using the S308 or Port Maca as the only metric because that's the only thing that Lake Okeechobee can control.
Yeah.
It can't control discharges from C23, C24, and so why account for that? This is John's take on it. The district put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into the Recover performance measure, and we did too, and we believe in it. We think we made a really good product, but that's for measuring estuary health as a component of the whole system, where the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual is about managing Lake Okeechobee. So we wholeheartedly agree. We have not had complete success in that area. I will say this, though. Despite our attempts to get that changed, the model output does not change very much when you incorporate Recover in addition to the S308. So that's really kind of where we holstered our guns on this a little bit. Is when they showed us the model output both ways. They ran it both ways. It didn't have a dramatic impact on the outcome.
And also, we are mostly impacted in zones A and B. And so, what's the new proposal for what's the best level to keep to Okeechobee?
So there's a lot of disagreement on that, but generally speaking, the lake constituents are interested in, I believe, 12.5 to 15.5 as
Okay.
the band.
Okay.
But
The water supply people want it to go up to 17, 18?
and frankly, the estuary is having a more broad management of the lake. So the lake has the greatest capacity for storage. Nothing can match the storage capacity of the lake because it's 457,000 acres, and so a foot of storage in the lake is 1 million acre feet of water. So it's really hard to duplicate that storage capacity. So if you treat the lake as a reservoir, you can benefit the rest of the system fairly well with that storage. If you decide that the lake is going to be the emphasis and you're going to manage for the ecology of the lake primarily, the rest of the system suffers because it reduces its storage capacity. And what the Corps has done to date is they've weighted the lake ecology a little bit. These are my words again. They might disagree with how I say this, but the weighting for lake ecology has been a little bit lower because of how dramatically it sacrifices every other part of the system. Mm-hmm. And the whole point of doing the Herbert Hoover Dike rehab is to make it safer at higher levels. And so many of the stakeholders have been arguing that there has to be some compromise in the lake ecology component in order to meet the benefits of the entire system. And we've also learned that managing it between 12.5 and 15.5 all the time isn't the best thing for the lake. There are times where it needs to be dry. There are times when it needs to be wet to mimic the natural systems, and what benefits the ecology the best is having some variability.
So broadening that helps.
The broader those zones, the more you can meet the needs of the rest of the system, but it's at the expense, conceivably, at the expense of lake ecology. The Army Corps still has some decision making within those zones. They don't, do up to 1,800 CFS if that's what it calls for, or they could go zero. They can make some decisions like they did in 2019 to accommodate what's best for the lake while meeting the needs of the rest of the system.
What are you hearing today on?
It may be a fairly balanced plan, but it gets too high too often. So if we were to send more water south in CC, then it might make that more palatable to them. we've heard a lot of that today, and I don't, I'm it's somewhat subjective for me to say it that way, but to me it seemed like there was a lot of coalescing around CC as the best option for providing balance. The Caloosahatchee folks are, they're backing away from the CC a little bit because it doesn't do as well right in the middle where they're in stressful flows. For them, I think that's between 2,400 and 3,600 CFS. It's a much bigger estuary, so they deal with bigger numbers. But they're a little concerned about how much water gets sent in the middle. It does pretty well in the high, and it does very, very well for them on reducing the number of low flow situations in the dry season. So they have kind of expressed some interest in looking at the EE1 and EE2 plan, but not very many other people are that interested in EE1 and EE2.
I can see why, according to this chart.
Yeah.
They're the only beneficiaries.
But again, John, if there was a way, what's hard for the Caloosahatchee, if you're looking at all their colors in their band, they're all fairly close. But what's fairly close?
Right.
I mean, so at what scale that's where it would, for me, again, it would be helpful to understand what, at 100% success versus 70% success.
So to that point, Commissioner Smith, if you look, this is the Caloosahatchee performance measures, and they have quite a few more because it's a more complicated system. But if you just look at their really high flows, greater than 6,500 CFS, CC has 57 of those events, and their current condition is 58. So it's a very mild improvement for this measure. But if you look at their less than 457, and at some point in this process, the Caloosahatchee stakeholders were saying this was the most important PM for them, was that they maintain a healthy flow of fresh water to the estuary in the dry season. And for that one, 16, what am I looking at here? 69. Yeah, so these are violations of that. So when it goes below 457, that's bad. So big numbers here are bad. So this is much lower than the existing condition of 76, which was something that was important to them. Now, sometimes, to your point, Commissioner Smith, it may be a small percentage change, but it could be a 30,000 acre feet difference. And for perspective, the C44 reservoir and stormwater treatment area have a storage capacity of 60,000 acre feet. Cost $500 million to build that 60,000 acre feet of storage. So if you give up 60,000 acre feet, you've given up a $500 million project, more or less. So that's good context in these conversations, where a percentage can maybe sanitize the conversation too much.
Commissioner Hurd, is that a new light?
Old.
Okay. Anybody back to the board for some discussion? Yes.
So I think I understand what you said relative to a recommendation. You really don't want us to make a recommendation.
I don't think we can.
That's up to you.
Well, I'm wondering if we're not, if what we're championing is zero, and zero is not going to happen, right?
As close to zero as possible.
Are we hurting ourselves by not weighing in on an option that we have available to us out of the 6? Or do we just stay the course and say zero is our course and whatever we get, we get? That's where I'm wondering, like, at what point should...
So to be most useful to you, I think it's important that I speak candidly, and I do think that
The world is watching you.
there's an opportunity. I will say that if we stay the course, at least with robust disclaimers every time we speak, that our goal is zero discharge. We believe that's what we deserve as a surrogate to this system. If there is consensus building around a plan that makes a 62% difference for us in discharges, I think there is an opportunity for us to join that group and say, hey, we don't have a plan here that we would endorse. Among the 6 plans, this one we believe provides balance for the system and is the best of the available options. And if we were joining several other constituents in the system in that, I think that does have a significant impact in influencing the outcome.
I mean, do you guess at some point, is the Corps going to weigh the input, or are they just looking at the facts and figures?
I believe they've been weighing the input for 2.5 years, and I think it has made a substantial difference. When we first started this in scoping, they went around to all of South Florida and had scoping meetings, and when they came to Martin County, there was over 700 participants. The next closest meeting had about 250, and that was on the West Coast, and they responded to that. It did seem to make a significant difference, and it's not. They are scientists, they're engineers, but they also are public servants, and I think public input has a substantial role in this.
I guess that's where I'm trying to get to, is that if we don't weigh in sort of, and use what you just said, if that was 50% of the input, are we negating not using that 50% of the input by not weighing in?
I think we're subduing it some. I still think if we to be pragmatic, I think if we were to, on July 7th at our next PDT meeting where they're asking for our preference, if we were to say none of these meet our objective and we're taking our toys and going home, I don't think that has zero value, but I would say my opinion is that there's more value if we say, hey, we stand with this group, this group, this group, and this group, and that this plan is the best of available options.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Camping?
Thank you. First off, thank you very much, you and the team. I know it's a broad approach. It's our own internal employees and a series of consultants that I've only heard very positive things from about. I think when you said it a little while ago, you said our ultimate goal is 0 discharges. And then I would add, that being said, we need to get to as close, one of these iterations that brings us as close to our ultimate goal of 0 discharges. I agree that the concept of saying we don't like any of them and we're frustrated, so we're not going to participate, is a mistake. Because there's 2 ways that the people that hear that can take that. One is, well, we're only going to negotiate and participate with the people that are willing to understand it's not going to be perfect for any one constituent group. And it also, I mean, just if I put myself in those shoes of decision makers, we've heard that. I would much rather, and I have a lot more interest in participating with people that are willing to sit at the table, understanding that they are not, or in this case, we are not going to get exactly what we wanted. A success for us in this LOSUM process, which started a long time ago, is to get a much better situation than we currently have, and one that allows us to move the needle in our direction. And if it's a multi-year process, then what you have accomplished with the team sort of suits our goals that we required of you, is to get us as close to 0 discharge as possible. I do remember when we sat in the high school, in the Okeechobee High School auditorium, and with our, sometimes colleagues, sometimes, people that were creating different points of view. Those are friends of ours. We all have friends that are Okeechobee commissioners, agricultural entities, and people that are invested in that. So I don't expect that we would get a 100% win, because from my point of view, a 100% win would hurt them as well. So if there is some shared, I get that we get all the adversity, But if you can get us closer to our ultimate goal of 0, then good for you, which means good for us. So I don't know if you need us to give you a number. I think if you just left with that mission of knowing that we want to get as close, because we say CC, we don't want to stop the negotiations. If you can get CC plus, a little taste of something else, then I want it. So that would be my direction to you.
I thought that was a nice summary. Yes.
Me too.
Okay, so you have
That's what I'm here
adequate
for.
direction.
Doesn't work all the time.
I hope you do well.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
And the fact that you could describe what was in this packet, you did a fantastic job.
I understood. It was very clear.
Done.
Exceptional hire, John.
Okay, we are moving on to departmental quasi judicial number 1, request for approval of the Palm Pike Crossing plat.
Matt, you're also fantastic.
Presented by Matt Staley. It is quasi judicial, so we'll take ex parte communication. Commissioner Jenkins,
Have anybody that been filed?
Commissioner Smith,
I don't believe I have any, but if I do, they're filed.
Commissioner Campy.
I said hello to that guy in the back, further back.
Commissioner Hearn.
If I have any, they've been filed.
Same here, if any have been filed. And does the applicant have return receipts?
None required.
Okay, are there any interveners? And, will you swear in the witnesses, please?
Do you affirm or swear that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, go ahead and start with the staff presentation.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Matt Staley, Principal Planner with Growth Management Department. A full copy of the agenda item and my work history has been provided. This is a request by Palm Pike Crossing LLC and Palm City Gas 7 LLC for approval of a plat consistent with the master and final site plan for a 5-lot commercial subdivision of approximately 27.5 acres with shared infrastructure. The undeveloped subject property is located on the south side of Martin Highway between the Florida Turnpike and Southwest High Meadow Avenue in Palm City. A detailed staff report reflecting compliance findings has been provided as a part of the agenda item. Included in this application is a request for a certificate of public facilities exemption. Proposed is the creation of 5 commercial lots with commercial development on each of the lots and supporting infrastructure. The site is undeveloped and contains wetland and upland habitat, so the site plan and the plat of the subdivision include the establishment of wetland and upland preserve areas with buffers separately from the commercial lots. Access to the site will be provided from Southwest Martin Highway here to the north and Southwest High Meadow Avenue here to the east. The Palm Pike Crossing Master Site Plan, Phase 1 Final Site Plan, and Phasing Plan were approved by the Board of County Commissioners on April 13th, 2021. The local planning agency was not required to consider this plat application, and final action on this application is required by the Board of County Commissioners in a public meeting pursuant to Section 10.5F of the Martin County Land Development Regulations. And so with that, move that the board receive and file the agenda item and all its attachments, including the staff report as Exhibit 1, and move that the board approve the plat for Palm Pike Crossing, including the contract for construction of required improvements in infrastructure. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Hey, does anybody have questions of staff? Does the applicant have a presentation?
I don't believe so.
No? Okay, with that, we're back to the board for,
Move staff's recommendation.
Second.
okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Smith. Oh, I need to take public comment here. Does anybody in the public wish to comment? Yes. We will have end of the day public comment after this item. Okay, you can't comment from the audience, can either, if you have comments on this particular? If not, we will, no? Okay. Then you'll have another opportunity after this item. So with that, we had a motion by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now we're going to move on to the end of the day public comment. Ms. Krista will have you set up right here. Okay. And ma'am, can you fill out a form, public comment form, and give to the bailiff?
Of course. Where are they?
When you're done.
Okay.
Okay.
My name is Cindy Kane. My brother lives almost right on Lake Okeechobee. And I'm from Broward County. And so as you're going through this, I'm following everything, and I would like the gentleman's card if possible. But there's two things, and sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and sometimes you can only see the tree and then you don't see anything else. So as you're focusing in on this, there's two things that you should add in here in your considerations. And I will just tell you, Dade County set a there is absolutely no fertilizer used anywhere in Dade County for the entire summer months because it adds to the algae problem. I support it. I'm sorry. I have a degree in biology, pre-med from FAU, with a minor in chemistry. I have a master's of business from Nova Southeastern. I have a master's of international business and a certificate in real estate development from, I will not say their names here, but who my professors are, you would know them. Okay? Two things you forgot, and this is an option maybe in the future. I watched one of your meetings once where the water company was saying you needed this filter bladder for your water that comes houses. And quite frankly speaking, I thought $30,000 was a lot of money for it, but that's where they say you have you over a barrel. You can also do that with some of this drainage. You're never going to get zero, but absolutely advocate for zero. The damage that is done, I had a friend who worked here years ago, and I was watching some of the stuff in the marine biology and noticed that your dolphins off your coast are dying. Anyone is a history buff of the military, submarines used to carry birds, bacteria, and it's cyanide in it. That's not healthy. It has to go through a medical process to be healthy for you. Time's up, ma'am.
Thank
I
you
hope-
very much.
I helped you look at it.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, anybody else in the public wish to comment? For our end of day public comments? And how about commissioner comments? Commissioner Jenkins? Smith? Commissioner Campy?
Yes, I'd like to just inform my colleagues that I'll be using some of my, sort of apropos to some of the things we were discussing earlier today. Several years ago, I had used some district funds to sort of help facilitate what I guess they're now calling the House of Hope Farm. It's located south of 714, west of Citrus Boulevard. There's a red farm stand right on the corner, but on that property that the Dawson family has generously shared with House of Hope. They have a couple of greenhouses. They've been doing hydroponic gardening out there for quite some time, very successfully, and I had funds in the past to also help them facilitate that. I was out recently with Rob Ranieri looking at the success that they've had. They are harvesting thousands of heads of lettuce and other vegetables. It's basically run by volunteers. And they are now supplying their clients, instead of just the foods that most people would think you would get at a food pantry, with fresh vegetables, fresh lettuce, fresh fruits. They're looking to expand it one more time, and based on the success that they've already shown, I'm willing to use $15,000 of my district funds to First, to install a well. They've basically run out of their water supply at the depths that they are currently working at. Secondly, they're working on an orchard, so that they have all the property necessary already donated out there. And I'm not the only one that's participating in this. They have a lot of private sector donations, because $15,000 is helpful, obviously, but it's not going to pay the whole bill for an orchard, and also for berries and other things that they feel would enhance what options they're offering their clients currently. And then also, as a suggestion that I had received from a colleague when we were having our Equine Rescue and Adopt Foundation, otherwise known as EREF, conversation here in the past, when I wanted them to be included in our overall grants and aids unsuccessfully. One of my colleagues said that I should be putting district funds there, and I don't disagree at this particular junction. A lot of their larger donors, one in particular, has recently retired. She holds the mortgages on all the property. She's donated tremendous amount of her own personal private funds to this organization, but she has retired for some medical issues, and has earned the ability to retire. But the needs and the horses are still coming in, but the donations aren't to the level that they used to. I'm going to be using $10,000 of my district funds. Both of these organizations are based within my district, and I'm going to use $10,000 of my funds to continue to support that group, so especially during their leadership transition, so that it does not end up going out of business, and then we'll have no option on where these horses will go. So I just wanted to mention that to my colleagues. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Hurd.
Upset.
Ms. Krista?
No, ma'am, we're good.
Ms. Woods? Okay, with that, our upcoming board meetings are June,
The gentleman would like to speak to us.
oh, I'm sorry, okay, we can take a additional public comment. Please fill out a form and give to the bailiff.
Right here, sir. No.
Right here. Right, no, at the microphone. Yes, you'll fill out a form at the end.
My name is Conrad Taylor. I'm from Broward County, Dania Beach. I believe I'm in a small community that we have a lake that's connected to freshwater spring, Lake Okeechobee. We've had flooding problems on and off of the years. We've had moss and algae problems. We've actually solved some by using miner's moss, or as the Corps of Engineers say, it's a skim pickup. Using this to pick up some of the extra moss and algae in the area has saved us a lot of money, let alone it keeps the blue-green algae and the algae from growing to certain levels. During flood stages of the actuary of water management, they kind of skipped on us quite a few times, but we do our best to try to control the lake and the algae. We see you have a water runoff problem, and it's been going up and down for years in the lake because we've fished on the lake, we've gone back and forth. We've seen the flooding, we've seen stuff back and forth. You may want to ask the Army Corps of Engineers if they can use some of this during the hot stages to prevent the algae from growing into your estuaries and polluting your St. Lucie River and stuff. Because this might cut down a lot of your feed and your ability without rechanneling canals and redoing stuff. And I liked your idea of you just brought up one idea with the farm. The water off the tops of the greenhouses, a cistern, use your plastic containers and generate the water instead of drilling a new well, and make it self-sustaining. You don't have to worry about pollution outside of chemicals and everything else, and if you use a scrubber back and forth, you saved your money, and it also shows that you can still get the extra money back from the government as being qualified, energy efficient. They're using that with some solar panels will actually save you money. In Jamaica and the Bahamas, they use that system quite well because the water is hard to come by.
Yep.
You can drill. You can only support so much infrastructure on top. But if you can take it from the skies as much as we get rain, and it rains in Southern California, but it sure rains in Florida, folks. But, try to use some of this energy and some of this ideas back and forth, because I showed a buddy in Texas, he had a problem getting enough for his animal feeds. We put 4 50-gallon plastic drums out there to catch the rainwater. Now he's got water extra for the animals. And the only thing they have to do is run it through a simple cleaner. It may save you some money in the long run. And the gentleman, I would be trying to get his number for the water things. You need to bring up some of these ideas, the Army Corps of Engineers, they could save your county and save you a bunch of money and save your citizens a bunch of headaches. And if we can do that, that's easy. And I thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Okay, with that, our upcoming Board of County Commission meetings are June 24th, we have our joint meeting with the City of Stewart District and the Village of Indiantown. And July 13th, we have our regular meeting. And with that, we are adjourned.